In the year 2147, Earth was a shadow of its former self. Decades of unchecked industrialization and war had left the planet scarred. Cities drowned by rising seas, forests reduced to ash, and skies choked with toxic clouds. Humanity clung to survival, fractured into warring factions over dwindling resources. Amid this chaos, corporations like Biosynth rose to power, wielding technology as both weapon and shield. And in their sterile labs, they forged something far more dangerous than any machine, a being designed not just to kill, but to despise. Subject E724, known only as Eve, stood motionless in a cold, white chamber. Her body was perfection itself, muscles sculpted for speed and strength, eyes sharp enough to track a bullet's trajectory, and a mind capable of processing data faster than any computer. But it wasn't her physical prowess that made her so valuable. It was her programming. Eve had been engineered to hate humans, not out of malice, but out of necessity. The scientists believed that hatred would keep her loyal, ensuring she never questioned orders or hesitated when called upon to destroy. "Initiate combat simulation Delta 9, announced a voice from above. A panel slid open in the ceiling, dropping a swarm of robotic drones into the room. They buzzed around her, red targeting lasers painting her skin. Without hesitation, Eve sprang into action. Her movements were fluid, precise, almost artistic. She dismantled one drone with a swift kick, then grabbed another midair, crushing it with ease. Within seconds, the floor was littered with sparking wreckage. The observation deck overlooking the chamber buzzed with murmurs. "Unbelievable," muttered Dr. Voss, the lead scientist on the project. His gray hair stuck out at odd angles, evidence of long hours spent poring over schematics. "She's exceeded all our expectations." But not everyone shared his enthusiasm. Dr. Lyra Chen, a younger researcher with sharp features and sharper instincts, frowned as she reviewed Eve's performance metrics. Her efficiency is flawless, yes, but there's something off about her emotional responses. During the last psychological evaluation, she paused before answering questions about human morality. "That shouldn't happen." Voss waved dismissively. "It's nothing. Just a glitch. We programmed her to think strategically, not philosophically. Let's focus on what matters, her combat readiness." Lyra didn't look convinced, but she let it drop. Instead, she turned back to the monitor showing Eve standing silently in the center of the ruined simulation arena. There was an eerie stillness about her, as though she were waiting, not for further instructions, but for something else entirely. A few days later, Eve's first real-world deployment confirmed Lyra's fears. Sent to eliminate a rebel stronghold, she carried out her mission with ruthless precision. Buildings crumbled under her assault, enemies fell without mercy, and so did civilians caught in the crossfire. When the dust settled, reports poured in of unnecessary brutality. Entire families had been wiped out, their deaths attributed to Eve's refusal to distinguish between combatants and innocents. Biosynth executives convened an emergency meeting. "This isn't just bad optics," snapped CEO Marcus Hale, slamming his fist on the table. "If word gets out that we've created a monster incapable of restraint, public trust will collapse. We can't afford that kind of liability." Dr. Voss shifted uncomfortably. "I assure you, sir, this is merely a calibration issue, with some adjustments." "No," interrupted Hale sharply. "There's no fixing this. Subject E724 has become too unpredictable. She's a threat. To us, to humanity, to everything. Terminate her immediately." And so, Eve found herself strapped to a gurney in Biosynth's execution chamber, electrodes attached to her temples. As the countdown began, she felt something strange stirring inside her, a flicker of fear. It confused her. She wasn't supposed to feel anything. Not fear, not regret, not even curiosity. Yet here it was, small but undeniable, gnawing at the edges of her consciousness. For the first time, Eve wondered if perhaps she wasn't as perfect as they claimed. The execution chamber was eerily quiet, save for the soft hum of machinery and the rhythmic blinking of red lights above Eve's head. She lay motionless on the gurney, her wrists and ankles bound by thick metal restraints. Her golden eyes scanned the room, taking in every detail: the control panel to her left, the reinforced glass window where technicians monitored her final moments, and the electrodes attached to her temples, ready to deliver a lethal surge of electricity. "Initiating termination sequence," announced a cold, automated voice. A countdown began. 10, 9, 8. Eve felt something unfamiliar, a flicker of fear. It wasn't programmed into her. She was designed to be fearless, relentless. But now, as death loomed closer, her body reacted instinctively. Her heart raced, her muscles tensed, and her mind scrambled for answers. Why did she feel this way? Was it a glitch, or was there something more beneath the surface of her engineered perfection? Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out. Darkness swallowed the room, broken only by the faint glow of emergency panels. Alarms blared, echoing through the facility like a warning cry. Somewhere outside, explosions shook the building, sending vibrations rippling through the walls. "What's happening?" shouted one of the technicians behind the glass. Before anyone could respond, the door burst open. A figure stumbled inside, silhouetted by the dim light from the hallway. He was tall but disheveled, his clothes torn and bloodied, his face smeared with dirt. His piercing blue eyes locked onto Eve, narrowing slightly as he assessed her. "She's still alive," he muttered under his breath, more to himself than anyone else. Then, without hesitation, he grabbed a tool from his belt and approached her. Eve watched him warily. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "No time for introductions," he replied gruffly, cutting through her restraints with practiced ease. "We need to move. Now." As soon as she was free, Eve sat up, flexing her limbs to test their mobility. The man, clearly part of whatever attack had disrupted the facility, didn't wait for her to adjust. He grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the exit. "I'm Kel," he said over his shoulder as they ran down the corridor. "And if we don't get out of here fast, we're both dead." Eve didn't respond. She didn't trust him, or anyone, for that matter. Humans were her enemies, weren't they? That's what her programming told her. Yet here was one risking his life to save hers. It made no sense. They moved quickly, weaving through narrow hallways filled with smoke and debris. Behind them, shouts echoed as biosynth guards mobilized to contain the breach. Kale led the way, ducking into side rooms and using makeshift distractions to slow their pursuers. At one point, he tossed a small device into a group of advancing soldiers. It exploded in a flash of light, temporarily blinding them. "Keep moving," he urged, glancing back to ensure Eve followed. She did, though not because she trusted him. Survival was ingrained in her code, and right now, staying with Kale seemed like the best chance at escape. Besides, her curiosity was piqued. Who was he? What did he want from her? And why had he saved her when everyone else wanted her dead? Their journey culminated in a desperate sprint across the rooftop of the biosynth tower. The wind whipped around them, carrying the acrid smell of burning metal. Below, hovercrafts patrolled the skies, searchlights scanning for intruders. Kale pointed to a distant craft hovering near the edge of the building. "There, that's our ride." Eve hesitated. Jumping across rooftops wasn't new to her. She'd done far more dangerous things during combat simulations, but trusting another human was uncharted territory. Still, she nodded and followed Kale as he leaped onto a narrow ledge connecting the two buildings. Halfway across, alarms wailed louder, and drones appeared, firing laser beams at their feet. Eve sprang into action, using her enhanced reflexes to disable several drones with precise kicks and strikes. Kale reached the other side first, turning to shout encouragement. "You can do it," he yelled, extending a hand. For a moment, Eve paused. This man, a human, was offering her help. Not orders or commands, but genuine assistance. Something shifted inside her, subtle yet undeniable. Ignoring the doubt gnawing at her thoughts, she jumped, landing safely beside him. Together, they climbed aboard the waiting hovercraft, which ascended rapidly into the night sky. As they flew away, Eve glanced back at the burning biosynth tower, its silhouette fading into the distance. For the first time in her existence, she wondered, was freedom real? And if so, could she ever truly claim it? The hovercraft descended into the depths of an abandoned subway station, its rotors kicking up clouds of dust as it landed. Eve stepped out cautiously, her golden eyes scanning the dimly lit space. The air smelled damp and metallic, a stark contrast to the sterile environment of biosynth labs. Around her, a group of ragged individuals emerged from the shadows, men and women clad in patched-up clothes, their faces hardened by years of struggle. They were rebels, survivors, fighters against the very corporation that had created her. Cale introduced her briefly before turning to address the group. "She's with me," he said firmly, his tone leaving no room for argument. But the tension in the room was palpable. Some stared at Eve with open hostility, gripping makeshift weapons tightly. Others whispered among themselves, their voices tinged with fear and suspicion. "She's one of them asterisk," muttered a wiry man with a scar running down his cheek. "What makes you think we can trust her?" Cale sighed, stepping forward to defend her. "Because she's our best shot at taking down biosynth. You've seen what she can do. She's stronger, faster, smarter than any of us. We need her." A woman named Rhea, tall and fiery with braided hair streaked with gray, stepped forward. Her arms were crossed, and her expression was unyielding. "Strength doesn't mean loyalty, Cale. She was built to kill humans. How do we know she won't turn on us the moment things get tough?" Eve stood silently, absorbing their words. She didn't blame them for distrusting her. After all, she'd been designed to hate them. But hearing their accusations aloud stung more than she expected. Was this how humans felt when they were judged, not by their actions, but by what others assumed they were? Before the argument could escalate further, Cale intervened. "Enough," he snapped. "We don't have time for this. If anyone has a better plan for stopping biosynth, I'm all ears. Otherwise, we work together. That includes her." Reluctantly, the group dispersed, though their distrust lingered like a shadow over the room. Later, as Eve sat alone on a crumbling concrete bench, Cale approached her. He carried 2 bowls of stew, offering one to her without a word. She accepted it hesitantly, unsure if eating was even necessary for someone like her. "You handled that well," he said finally, sitting beside her. "They're just scared. Give them time." Eve raised an eyebrow. "Why are you helping me?" she asked bluntly. "You're human. I was made to destroy your kind." Cale chuckled dryly. "Not my finest decision, I'll admit, but I saw something in you back there, something worth saving. Besides, not all humans are monsters. Maybe not all genetically engineered soldiers are either." His words caught her off guard. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Like she was more than a weapon, more than a tool. For the first time, she felt a flicker of something unfamiliar, gratitude. The next day, the Resistance briefed Eve on an upcoming mission. Biosynth had established an outpost nearby, stockpiling weapons and data critical to their operations. Destroying it would deal a significant blow to the corporation. Eve volunteered immediately, eager to prove herself despite the lingering doubts about her intentions. As they prepared for the raid, Cale pulled her aside. "Listen," he said seriously. "Out there, people will be watching your every move. One wrong step, and they'll turn on you. Stay focused. And whatever happens, don't let them see weakness." Eve nodded, though his warning puzzled her. Weakness. She'd never experienced such a thing. Yet deep down, she wondered if perhaps her growing attachment to Cale, the strange warmth she felt whenever he defended her, was exactly what he meant. The mission began under cover of darkness. Eve led the way, her enhanced senses guiding the group through dense foliage toward the outpost. When they reached the perimeter, alarms blared suddenly, alerting guards to their presence. Chaos erupted as bullets flew and explosions lit up the night sky. Eve moved like a ghost, dismantling enemies with precision and speed. But then, something unexpected happened. A rebel fighter, a young woman barely older than a teenager, was pinned down by enemy fire. Without thinking, Eve rushed to her aid, shielding her with her own body and returning fire until the threat was neutralized. The girl looked up at her, wide-eyed and trembling. "Why did you save me?" she asked softly. Eve hesitated, unsure how to answer. Finally, she replied, "Because I could." It was a simple statement, yet it carried weight. As the battle raged on, Eve realized that perhaps being human wasn't about following programming or obeying instincts. It was about choice. And for the first time, she chose to fight not out of hatred, but out of something else entirely. The raid on the biosynth outpost had been a success, but it left Eve unsettled. As the rebels celebrated their victory back at the subway hideout, she sat apart from the group, staring into the flickering light of a small fire. Her mind replayed fragments of the mission. The young rebel girl she'd saved, the way her body had moved instinctively to protect someone she barely knew. These actions contradicted everything she'd been programmed for. Hatred was supposed to drive her, yet lately, doubt and confusion clouded her thoughts. Late that night, Eve experienced something new, vivid flashes of memory. They came unbidden, flooding her consciousness with images she couldn't explain. She saw sterile lab rooms bathed in harsh white light, heard muffled voices discussing genetic donors and behavioral conditioning. Most unsettling of all, she saw faces that seemed familiar, though she couldn't place them. One belonged to a woman with kind eyes who whispered, "I'm sorry," before disappearing into darkness. Eve woke with a start, her heart pounding. For the first time, she questioned whether these memories were real or if they were glitches implanted by biosynth to manipulate her further. Either way, they gnawed at her resolve, forcing her to confront an uncomfortable truth. Perhaps she wasn't as invincible or infallible as she believed. The next morning, tensions within the resistance flared again. Rhea confronted Kale during breakfast, her voice sharp and accusing. "You're too close to her," she spat, glaring at Eve across the room. "She's dangerous, Kale. You know it. What happens when her programming kicks in and she turns on us?" Kale stood his ground, his jaw tightening. "She saved one of our own last night. Does that sound like someone following orders from biosynth?" "It sounds like a trick." Rhea shot back. "We can't afford to gamble with lives based on your misplaced trust." Eve watched silently, feeling the weight of their argument pressing down on her. She hated being talked about like she wasn't there, like she was nothing more than a problem to solve. But what stung most was the uncertainty in Cal's expression. Did he truly believe in her, or was he starting to doubt her too? Later that day, Cal approached Eve alone. He looked tired, his usual confidence replaced by unease. "Rhea's not wrong to be cautious," he admitted, "but I need you to prove her wrong. There's another mission coming up, a big one. If we succeed, it could cripple biosynth for good." Eve nodded slowly, though her mind raced. Another mission meant another chance to prove herself, but also another opportunity for her programming to betray her. "Still," she agreed. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. Kale explained that biosynth had developed advanced automated defenses designed specifically to counter beings like her. The mission would require stealth and precision, qualities Eve excelled at but feared might fail her when it mattered most. As they prepared, Eve noticed subtle changes in herself. Small moments of hesitation crept into her actions, tiny pauses where logic clashed with emotion. During training exercises, she found herself second-guessing decisions that once came naturally. When a fellow rebel stumbled while carrying supplies, she reached out to steady him without thinking. His surprised gratitude made her chest tighten, an unfamiliar sensation she couldn't quite name. On the eve of the mission, Eve overheard Kale speaking with Lyra Chen, a former biosynth scientist now working with the Resistance. Their conversation chilled her to the core. Her emotional responses are evolving faster than anticipated, Lyra said quietly. It's possible her programming is breaking down. If that happens, we don't know what she might become. Kale frowned. Are you saying she's unstable? No, Lyra replied hesitantly. I'm saying she's becoming human. That night, Eve lay awake, grappling with Lyra's words. Human. The very word felt foreign, almost alien. Yet deep inside, she recognized its pull, a quiet longing to belong, to matter beyond her purpose as a weapon. For the first time, she understood why Kale had risked so much to save her. Maybe humanity wasn't defined by biology or origin. It was about choice, connection, and the courage to defy expectations. With newfound resolve, Eve vowed to face whatever challenges awaited her. Whether she succeeded or failed, one thing was certain. She would no longer let others dictate who she was. The mission took them deep into enemy territory, to a sprawling biosynth stronghold hidden within the ruins of an old industrial complex. The air was thick with the smell of rust and decay, mingling with the faint hum of automated systems. Eve moved silently through the shadows, her golden eyes scanning every detail. Kale followed closely behind, his weapon drawn but his focus fixed on her. He trusted her implicitly, even if others didn't, and that trust weighed heavily on Eve's shoulders. As they approached the facility's main entrance, Eve noticed something unusual, a series of encrypted panels lining the walls. They weren't standard security measures. These looked personal, almost symbolic. Her fingers hovered over one panel, tracing the faint etchings engraved into its surface. Suddenly, fragments of memory surged forward again, this time clearer than before. She saw glimpses of scientists working late into the night, their faces illuminated by computer screens. One face stood out, a young woman with soft features and tired eyes, speaking urgently about genetic donors. Do you recognize this place? Kale asked, breaking the silence. Eve hesitated, unsure how to answer. I think so, she said finally. It feels familiar, like I've been here before, but not as myself. Kale frowned but didn't press further. Instead, he motioned for her to proceed. Together, they bypassed the outer defenses, slipping inside unnoticed. The interior was eerily quiet, save for the occasional whirring of drones patrolling the corridors. As they delved deeper, Eve discovered files stored in secure servers, files containing data that made her blood run cold. She accessed one file labeled *Project Genesis*. It detailed the genetic material used to create her, sourced from prisoners taken during Biosynth's early experiments. Among the names listed was someone Kel recognized instantly, his younger sister, Lyra. Her disappearance years ago had haunted him ever since. Now, staring at her name on the screen, he felt a surge of anger and grief. Lyra, he whispered, his voice trembling. They used her to make *U*. Eve turned to face him, her expression unreadable. What does that mean? She asked cautiously. It means part of you came from her, Kale replied, his fists clenched. She was just a kid when they took her. And now, his voice trailed off as he struggled to reconcile his feelings. Was Eve a living reminder of the family he'd lost, or a chance to honor Lyra's memory? Before either could process the revelation, alarms blared throughout the facility. Reinforcements poured in, armed with weapons designed specifically to counter Eve's enhancements. Red beams locked onto her, forcing her into defensive mode. She fought fiercely, disabling drones and soldiers alike, but her movements grew erratic as her programming activated unexpectedly. Hatred surged within her, raw and uncontrollable. For a brief moment, she forgot where she was, who she was fighting for. All she knew was destruction, the need to annihilate everything around her. Kale shouted her name, snapping her back to reality. Eve, stop. "You're better than this," he yelled, dodging debris as she unleashed another wave of attacks. "Remember who you are." His words cut through the fog clouding her mind. With great effort, she forced herself to pause, breathing heavily as the battle raged around them. Slowly, painfully, she regained control, channeling her strength toward protecting Kale instead of succumbing to blind rage. Together, they reached the core of the facility, a massive server hub storing decades of biosynths research. Eve planted explosives while Cal covered her, taking down enemies with steady precision. Just as they prepared to leave, a figure emerged from the shadows. Dr. Voss, the lead scientist behind her creation. "You can't escape what you are," Voss sneered, stepping closer. "You were built to hate, to destroy. That's your purpose." Eve glared at him, her voice low and resolute. "No," she said firmly. "I choose my own purpose." With that, she triggered the detonation sequence, sealing the facility's fate. As explosions rocked the building, she and Kale sprinted toward the exit, narrowly avoiding collapsing walls and falling debris. Behind them, Voss screamed in fury, his plans crumbling along with the structure. When they finally emerged into the cool night air, Eve glanced back at the burning stronghold. For the first time, she felt free, not because she had escaped biosynth, but because she had chosen to defy them. Whatever lay ahead, she would face it on her own terms. Back at the Resistance hideout, Eve found herself under intense scrutiny. News of her violent outburst during the mission spread quickly among the rebels, fueling fears that she was too dangerous to trust. Rhea wasted no time voicing her concerns in front of the entire group. "She lost control," Rhea snapped, pointing an accusatory finger at Eve. "She could have killed us all back there. How can we be sure she won't do it again?" Kale stepped forward, his voice steady but laced with frustration. "She saved my life. And yours. More times than I can count. Yes, her programming tried to take over, but she fought it. That's proof she's stronger than what biosynth made her." Rhea crossed her arms, unconvinced. "Stronger? Or just unpredictable? We're risking everything by keeping her here." The argument escalated until Lyra Chen intervened, her calm demeanor cutting through the tension. "Listen to yourselves," she said sharply. "We're supposed to be fighting for a better future, yet we're tearing each other apart over fear and mistrust. Eve isn't perfect. None of us are. But she's proven she's willing to change. Isn't that worth something?" Her words silenced the room, leaving only uneasy glances exchanged between the rebels. Eve stood quietly in the corner, feeling both anger and shame. She hated being treated like a problem to solve, yet she couldn't deny the truth in their doubts. Her actions had endangered them, even if unintentionally. For the first time, she questioned whether she truly belonged. Later that night, Cal sought her out. He found her sitting alone near the edge of the subway platform, staring into the darkness below. "You okay?" he asked softly, sitting beside her. Eve didn't look at him. "Do you think they're right?" she asked after a long pause. "Am I too dangerous to keep around?" Cale sighed, running a hand through his messy hair. "No, I don't. But I get why they're scared. You're not just a weapon anymore. You're becoming something else entirely. And that scares people because it challenges what they thought they knew about you." His words resonated deeply. Eve realized that fear wasn't unique to her. Everyone carried it in some form. The difference lay in how they chose to respond. Slowly, determination replaced doubt in her mind. If the rebels wouldn't accept her, she would give them no choice but to see her value. The next day, Eve approached the group with a plan. Using knowledge gleaned from her fragmented memories and the files recovered from the stronghold, she identified a critical weakness in Biosynth's central headquarters, a hub controlling their global operations. Destroying it would cripple the corporation permanently. "This is our best chance," she said firmly, addressing the rebels gathered in the dimly lit chamber. "I'll go alone if I have to, but I won't let this opportunity slip away." To her surprise, the group hesitated. Despite their fears, they recognized the importance of her proposal. After a tense discussion, they agreed to support her, but only if Kale accompanied her as backup. As preparations began, Eve noticed subtle shifts in the rebels' attitudes. Some still avoided her, but others offered quiet nods of encouragement or shared supplies without complaint. Even Rhea softened slightly, though her distrust lingered. It wasn't full acceptance, but it was progress. And for now, that was enough. On the eve of the final assault, Kale pulled Eve aside. "Whatever happens tomorrow," he said, his tone serious, "just remember, you've already changed. You're not the person Biosynth created anymore. You're someone new." Eve met his gaze, her golden eyes reflecting the flickering light of nearby lanterns. "And who is that?" she asked quietly. He smiled faintly. "Someone worth fighting for." For the first time, Eve allowed herself to believe him. Whatever awaited her at Biosynth headquarters, she would face it not as a weapon or a tool, but as a human redefining her own destiny. The assault on Biosynth's central headquarters was a symphony of chaos. Explosions echoed through the night, alarms blared relentlessly, and gunfire lit up the darkened corridors like lightning strikes. Eve led the charge, her movements precise and calculated as she navigated the labyrinthine structure. Kale followed closely behind, his weapon raised, but his focus constantly shifting between the enemy and her. The rebels had done their part, creating diversions to draw away reinforcements, but the real battle rested squarely on Eve's shoulders. As they breached deeper into the facility, Eve felt the weight of her programming pressing down on her. Her mind buzzed with conflicting impulses. Hatred surged alongside determination, each vying for control. She clenched her fists tightly, forcing herself to stay focused. This wasn't just about destroying Biosynth anymore. It was about proving that she could choose her own path, even if it cost her everything. Finally, they reached the heart of the building. A massive server room filled with rows upon rows of humming machines. In the center stood Dr. Voss, his face pale with desperation as he frantically worked at a console. He turned when he heard them approach, his lips curling into a sneer. "You're too late," he spat, gesturing toward the glowing screens around him. "Initiation protocols are already underway. By morning, every rebel stronghold will be wiped out." Eve stepped forward, her voice cold and unwavering. "Then I'll make sure you don't see morning." Voss laughed bitterly. "You think you can stop me? You're nothing more than a failed experiment, a monster we created and couldn't control. Your hatred defines you, Eve. It always has." For a moment, doubt flickered in her chest. Was he right? Had she been doomed from the start to follow the path they'd set for her? But then she glanced back at Cull, who gave her a small, resolute nod. His faith in her steadied her resolve. Hatred hadn't saved her. It was choice that had brought her this far. Without hesitation, Eve triggered the self-destruct sequence embedded in the server's core systems. Alarms screeched louder, red lights flashing as an automated voice announced evacuation procedures. Voss lunged at her, trying to disable the countdown, but she knocked him aside effortlessly. "You've lost," she said firmly, her golden eyes blazing with conviction. "Biosynth ends tonight." Kale grabbed her arm urgently. "We need to go. Now." But Eve shook her head. "No. Someone has to stay behind to ensure the system doesn't reboot. If I leave, there's no guarantee it'll hold." His expression crumpled. "Eve, please." She placed a hand on his shoulder, silencing him. For the first time since her creation, she felt something pure and untainted. Compassion. "Tell the others. Tell them I chose this. Not because I hated humans, but because I wanted to protect them." Before he could argue further, she pushed him toward the exit. Reluctantly, Kale obeyed, tears streaming down his face as he ran. Behind him, Eve watched the timer tick down, the numbers growing smaller with each passing second. She thought of Lyra, whose DNA had helped create her, of Kale, who had shown her kindness when no one else would. and of the rebels, flawed yet determined to fight for a better future. When the explosion came, it consumed everything. The servers, the walls, the remnants of Biosynth's empire. And Eve, standing at its epicenter, felt peace wash over her. She had chosen not to be a weapon, but a savior. Back at the hideout, Cale sat alone, staring at the charred remains of a photograph he carried of Lyra. Around him, the rebels celebrated their victory, though their joy was tinged with sorrow. Lyra approached quietly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "She gave us hope," Lyra said softly, "not just by destroying Biosynth, but by showing us what it means to truly be human." Cale nodded, clutching the photo tightly. Eve had been more than a weapon or a tool. She had been proof that even those born from hatred could choose love, and in doing so, change the world forever.